The Upanishads are completely preoccupied with the emancipation of the individual soul from the bondage of ignorance and limitation. They deal mainly with the attainment of real knowledge leading to infinite joy. Everything else is woven around this great objective. Here is a story from the Chandogya Upanishad, the story of sage Raikwa. He practiced a vidya, an art known as samvarga. This vidya is known as samvarga vidya, the all-absorbent meditation. What does this mean? In this connection, the story goes in this manner. Raikwa, the cart driver. In ancient times, there was a king called Janasruti. He was ruling over a kingdom called Mahavrisa. He was known to be a good king, just and merciful to his subjects. He was particularly famous for his charities. He maintained numerous free-feeding houses. He built many rest houses along the royal road. His generosity was on the lips of all. He felt proud that he was able to achieve so much in his lifetime. He thought that that was the best way to accumulate religious merit and get peace of mind. He believed that he was the greatest patron and that there was none else like him. He used to measure his merit by the amount of charity he had distributed. One evening after the day's work, he was resting on the terrace of his palace. As he lay there under the sky, right above him, two white swans were speeding fast to their roost. As they were chattering and gossiping, the king overheard them. The male bird said to its mate, "You blind bat, do you not perceive the bright band of light that proceeds from King Janasruti? Beware lest you cross the flaming light of his fame and get yourself burnt. You must know that today there is none so famous as he for abundant charities." The female bird laughed. "Why do you thus threaten me, dear? We are wanderers of the skies. We know more of the world than others. After all, is this king's merit more than that of Raikwa, the cartman? The king is but mad after name and fame. It is this that drives him to action. With all his charities, he is ever restless. He hankers after praise. Raikwa, sitting where he is, attracts to himself, as it were, the merit of all around, as a lake draws into itself the waters on the slope. At peace with himself, he does what he ought to and what he can, and thinks not of the morrow." Thus saying, the birds flit past, and the shadows of the night closed on the sleepy earth. But the king, who had listened to the conversation, became very restless. Raikwa began to haunt him. "I must find out this man, little known to fame, but one who is at peace with himself and with the world," he said with determination. As he slept, he thought of some speedy way of finding Raikwa. At dawn, the birds began to sing the usual songs of praise to arouse the king from his sleep. But that morning, the king did not feel very happy over the customary eulogies. He became conscious that there were people greater than himself and that they deserved more than him. The birds and the bards sang, "Rise, ye great king, the most generous and powerful one, giver of charities with 100 hands, and patron of the 7 worlds, rise, for now it is morning. Suppliants from the corners of the world await thy abundant gifts." But he stopped them from repeating the words. He admonished the singers, saying, Waste not those epithets on me. There is one greater than myself, perhaps 100-fold greater. Go ye to the limits of my kingdom and find him out. I shall not feel happy till I have met that great soul. The king's servants, not a little surprised at this command, set out to seek Raikwa, the strange cartman, described by the king as a great soul. Some of his servants returned after a few days, unable to find Raikwa. But the king was not satisfied, and he asked them to seek him in a place where the knowers of Brahman, the possessors of spiritual knowledge, usually dwell. When the servants saw that the king would never be at ease till he had met the philosopher, they again went in search of him. They began to scour the villages of the kingdom of Mahavrasa. In one of the remote villages, a simple man, ostensibly a cart driver, was shown to them. He was Raikwa. With calmness written large on his face and with infinite kindness in his eyes, there sat Raikwa under his cart near his small cottage. The servants wondered for a time. What a fool is our king! He takes this bit of a man to be greater than himself. Certainly the king seems to have lost his head. Thus they muttered to themselves. But they were helpless. They went straight to the king and reported the matter. However ignorant his servants, the king knew the real worth of the man who sat under the cart. As is the wont while going to see a great saint or a great soul, the king took numerous gifts with him. His generosity was all the more lavish on this occasion. He took along with him 600 well-fed milk cows with calves, gold coins, chariots with horses, and other lovely presents. When the royal party arrived, Raikwa was at first surprised, but he divined the cause of the king's visit and saw that the king had come to him in search of spiritual truth and inner peace. The king made obeisance and stood with folded hands in a reverent mood. He requested Raikwa to accept his humble gifts and direct him as regards the God that he should worship in order to attain real happiness. The cartman philosopher, however, was not much enamored by the rich gifts. He did not readily welcome them. A little rebukingly, he said to the king, "O royal friend, why do you waste these precious things on me? All these and 100 kingdoms cannot buy spiritual knowledge. It is not something that can be bartered and bought in a market. These trinkets that you have brought are worth nothing to me." The king felt a little hurt at this remark, but his respect for Raikwa increased 100-fold when he saw his nonchalant attitude towards all material possessions. Disappointed and helpless for the time being, the king returned to his capital. But he had already come under the spell of Raikwa. The more he stayed away from him, the more he felt bereaved. He used to hear numerous stories as to how many a person with a sore heart went to Raikwa and came back consoled and calmed. The king decided to make one more attempt to draw out the philosopher. Once again he went in a humble and suppliant mood to the saint of the cart. He approached him and begged for knowledge as a favor. Raikwa saw that this king was now ripe for a spiritual lesson and therefore welcomed him with warmth. The king then led Raikwa to his shamiana and treated him with the utmost respect. They had a long and intimate talk about the matters of the mind and things of the spirit. Raikwa said, "The air swallows everything. When fire extinguishes, it disappears into the air. When the sun sets, it disappears into the air, and when the moon sets, it disappears into the air. When water dries up, it disappears into the air. Air swallows all these. This is the worship of forces of nature, Adi Dvaivata. Raikwa continued. Next is a worship concerning the body. Prana swallows. When a person sleeps, speech, the eyes, the ears and the mind all go into the prana. Prana swallows all these. Air and prana swallow everything. Raikwa said, in this creation there are many elements that are worshipped as gods. There is the wind that sweeps everything. The fire burns up whatever comes in contact with it. There is also the vital breath that activates a living being. It exists by itself, and yet it creates and sustains the creation. Thus, the entire creation is a complex instrument that is carrying out its work at the behest of the Spirit. O King, have neither pride nor vanity for the charities that you dispense. Go thou, great King, to thy palace. Give, but not with pride. Give generously, but not with egotism. Give freely, but not with an eye to fame. Give, but not as something that is yours, but as something given to you by the Spirit for giving to others. He who sees this truth becomes a seer, and to him nothing is wanting, and he becomes the enjoyer of things, not the vain sufferer. The king was extremely satisfied with these words of wisdom and experience that came from Raikwa. While departing, he gave 1,000 milk cattle, numerous gold coins and chariots, and his own daughter in marriage to Raikwa. All these he did not reject this time. Thenceforth the village came to be known as Raikapurna, after the philosopher of the cart. Raikwa imparted Samvarga Vidya to King Janasruti. Sage Raikwa apparently was a poor man having nothing but a cart, unknown to the people, and nobody recognized him as such. But he had one speciality, a power that was such that he could absorb all things into himself by a special technique of meditation, a Vidya. He practiced this Vidya, which was known as Samvarga Vidya, the all-absorbent meditation. Every one of us is drawn to things of sensation, yet we cannot drag anything inside ourselves. The senses are constantly directed outwards. We are like slaves to the external pleasures of the senses. As a result, we are enslaved to materialistic pleasures. How can we internalize these outer joys and desires? How can we make these passions our slaves? If we grasp Raikwa's teachings, we can manage our passions and make them our slaves. Consuming and controlling the passions and directing their flow from without to within, one can be a master of the senses. These sensations will be the followers, not the rulers. This Vidya is called Samvarga Vidya, and it is a meditation practice. In this case, the will demands its own intensity. Because of the previous habit of thinking that everything is outside, a weak-minded individual cannot practice this meditation. Because nothing is truly outside, but everything is the self, outsideness cannot be assigned to it. The intellect is incapable of comprehending this. The mind's trick is such that even if we believe that there is a self in the so-called externality of things, we would, by old habit, reject it. The skill of the absorbing activity in meditation, Samvarga Vidya, is the centering of consciousness in everything in the world, not as an object to be cognized or observed by the sense organs, but as a phase of consciousness itself. There is no subject-object dichotomy, but only the presence of the pure I-ness, the ubiquitous eternal subject, all objects being dissolved and interiorized within that witnessing self, the Sakshi Matra.